We find ourselves in the year 3019 of the Third Age, where the combined forces of the men of the West assault the Black Gate and face Sauron's hordes, all to give time to two hobbits, Frodo Baggins and Samwise Gamgee, to cast the One Ring into Mount Doom and end the darkness of Sauron and Mordor. Indeed, the hobbits throw the ring and vanquish the Dark Lord of Middle-earth. Meanwhile, in Dale, Dain II, king of the dwarves of Erebor, perishes fighting side by side with King Bran of Dale, who is slain first by the evil men of the East. After winning the battle, these servants of Sauron attempt to besiege Erebor, but are driven out of Dale by the new kings of Erebor and Dale, Thorin III Stonehelm and King Ba II. After these events, Celeborn and Galadriel, lords of Lothlorien, besiege Dol Guldur, where the elves eradicate every orc loyal to Sauron. Moreover, Camul was defended the Naked Hill and was crushed by the might of the elves. Finally, Galadriel, with her magic, brought down the walls of the Dark Fortress. With the fall of Dol Guldur, the retreat of the men of the East, and the destruction of Barad-dûr, evil in Middle-earth came to an end. The War of the Ring concluded with the Battle of Bywater and the final death of Saruman and his ruffians. Thus, in the year 3021, with the departure of Elrond, Galadriel, Gandalf, Bilbo, and Frodo, the Third Age ended and the Fourth Age began. Thus begins the Fourth Age, with the birth of the heir to the reunited kingdom, the first son of Elisar Telcontar and Arwer Andumiel, Eldarion. With the fall of Sauron, Elisar returned to Minas Tirith, where he was crowned and began the projects to repair the White City and all those cities and fortresses that had suffered damage during the War of the Ring. He also maintained a strong alliance with Eomer, king of Rohan. On the other hand, though the king had returned, Elisar decreed that the rank of Steward of Gondor should not be abolished and proposed Faramir for the position. Faramir accepted without hesitation, and the Steward of Gondor would become the king's right hand, his closest advisor, and the regent of Gondor in the High King's absence. At the same time, Aragorn ordered Prince Imrail of Dol Amroth to remain with a large number of knights and infantry to guard the entrance to Mordor, Morannon, and also to secure the region of Dagorlad and the old road to Rhûn. Even though the men of the East had retreated and their Dark Lord was defeated, they would not surrender easily and would continue to fight, for their ambition was to span westward and subjugate and plunder all the free peoples of Middle-earth. A few days later, a messenger arrived before the High King with bad news from Eredor. The Dunlendings, who had retreated after the fall of Isengard and the death of Saruman, had risen in arms once again and were raiding villages near their territory, including parts of the new reunited kingdom. Knowing he had few forces in the northern part of his realm, Elisar called his banners to battle and gathered an army made up entirely of troops from Gondor's vassals, Lossarnach, Pelargir, Pinafdjellin, among others, all except Dol Amroth, as their knights were already stationed in Morannon with their prince. By the king's order, Aragorn left Gondor's army to defend their lands from a possible attack from the east, and placed Faramir, Steward of Gondor, in command of that army. With his army fully assembled, Elisar Telcontar headed to Edoras. where he asked King Eomer of Rohan for help in commanding his Rohirrim and finally ending the Dunlending threat. Eomer agreed, as his bond with High King of the Reunited Kingdom was unbreakable. They were close friends. Eomer summoned his Rohirrim, and after a week, both armies crossed the Fords of Isen and camped north of the Isen River, near the border between Rohan and Dunland. The two kings wanted to give their soldiers some rest before entering hostile lands and dealing with the Dunlending threat. Meanwhile, Faramir ruled Gondor in the king's absence and went to Ithilien, where he met with Legolas. After the War of the Ring, Legolas had settled in the forest of Ithilien with several Sylvan elves to be near his friend Aragorn and assist him in any way he could. Faramir spoke with Legolas and asked if his scouts had spotted anything in recent weeks. Legolas shook his head, but urged the steward of Gondor to send some men to restore Minas Morgul and guard the pass to prevent any surviving orcs from Sauron's fall from entering their lands. Faramir understood the elves' concern and gathered several hundred soldiers, which he personally led to the Morgul Vale. Upon arrival, they found the fortress almost entirely deserted, a former stronghold of the Númenóreans now devoid of life. Though darkness had left the region, it was still necessary to restore the glory of what was once Minas Ithil. Faramir ordered his men to remain in the fortress and garrison it, while he and two scouts ventured into Shelob's lair. Back at the Dunland border, the combined armies of Rohan and the reunited kingdom broke camp and marched toward the town of Dunyard, north of the border. Two Dunlending scouts watched in fear and rode off as fast as they could to warn the town. Fortunately for them, being only two individuals, they arrived ahead of the vast armies and informed their people of the imminent threat. Men and women armed themselves to defend their land, preparing their defenses as best they could in the limited time they had. Finally, the armies arrived at the town and surrounded it. Eomer, remembering the atrocities the Dunlendings had committed in his lands, thought it best to kill them all and leave no one alive. He ordered the construction of a battering ram to break down the gate and launch a full assault. Aragorn, however, urged caution and suggested that it would be better to maintain the siege and starve them into surrendering to avoid more bloodshed.
Enough blood has been spilled,
he said. In the end, Eomer agreed to Aragorn's plan, and the siege continued. After a few days, Dunyar ran out of supplies. Before surrendering, their leader emerged from the town, shouting for the king of Rohan. Eomer responded alongside Elessar, facing him. In front of both kings, the Dunlending leader drew a dagger and cut his hand, letting his blood fall as he glared at Eomer and shouted, "This blood will never belong to Rohan!" Then, lowering his voice, he added, "We will fight." Drums began to sound from the town, and the Dunlending leader ran back to the gate, which swung open. Elessar and Eomer withdrew with their men and prepared for the impending battle. The Dunlendings poured out of the town, armed and ready to die for their land. Elessar positioned his men defensively, advancing his archers to massacre the Dunlending charge. But Eomer, resolute, prepared his riders for a frontal charge. The war horns of Rohan sounded, and the king, at the head of his cavalry, charged the enemy. Elessar, surprised, shouted, "Hold your fire! Hold your fire!" to his archers, who were ready to rain arrows on the barbaric Dunlendings. Eomer's charge was swift, and the slaughter was brutal. The horses mercilessly trampled the Dunlending ranks, which lacked armor and pikes, leaving no obstacle for the Rohirrim. The momentum of Rohan's riders destroyed nearly the entire Dunlending army. Though a final line remained, Eomer turned back with his riders and charged again to finish off the remaining men and women standing. In the end, the Dunlendings were annihilated and Eomer emerged victorious. Dunyard had been conquered, but the bloodshed was immense. Aragorn had not wanted such an outcome, but the Dunlendings left him no choice. Perhaps, if the leader had been slain, his men might have surrendered. But we will never know, for Eomer, driven by vengeance, spared no one. Later, Elessar agreed that Rohan would retain control of Dunyard, as Eomer had earned the victory. With this, Eomer divided his forces. Some would accompany him and Elessar further north, while the rest would remain in Dunyard to garrison the town and send word to the kingdom of the king's victory. Eomer and Elessar Tel Kontar then advanced northward, and at a crossroads, still within Dunland, they parted ways. Eomer would march towards Bairage, the capital of the Dunlendings, while Elessar would head into the lowlands of Dunland to eliminate the Dunlending threat to his lands and subdue the people of Dun Larak. They parted as good friends, despite some differences, and each set out on their respective paths.